In every family, there comes a night when love is tested by a locked door. On that night, you learn whether love is a welcome or a password. It was the kind of rain that takes your temperature for you, cold enough to make a body remember every year it has lived. 50 winters had taught Maria Carter to carry an umbrella and keep a spare sweater in the trunk, to pull her hair into a knot so it wouldn't drip down her neck. None of that wisdom mattered now. She was standing on the marble stoop of the Hale estate, soaked through, the box in her arms turning to pulp in the downpour, and a door that should have opened for a mother refusing to budge. Beyond the glass, the house wore its wealth like perfume. Columns, sconces, a foyer spread out like a ballroom. And there, behind a gauzy curtain, 3 silhouettes: Brandon, tall in a white shirt that wouldn't dare wrinkle; Victoria, a red mouth and a pale face, her posture ironed flat; and Lily, Maria's girl, hands folded over the soft rise of new life, eyes shining in that uncertain way of someone who has given all of her trust away and is praying it lands safely. Maria knocked again. The wood was too lovely for knocking, the kind that had probably been flown in from a country where trees are still named. Her knuckles were already raw. A slice along her ring finger left a dark, stubborn crescent on the gloss, as if to say, "I was here." I asked. "Please," Maria said, her voice thin in the storm. "I'm not here to make a scene. I brought the ribbons, the cards, the place settings." The box sagged in her embrace, a paper coffin for all the small, careful ways she had tried to show up. She had stayed up until 2 threading silk through holes punched by a kitchen fork because the nicer punch had jammed. She had counted the RSVP cards twice, corrected the spelling of a second cousin's girlfriend, taught herself to fold napkins into little lilies because the internet said it would be elegant. There is a particular devotion in a mother's hands; they can make ceremony out of scraps. The door latch clicked. A shoulder-width crack opened. Not Lily, Victoria. She was the kind of woman who could make kindness sound like an invoice. She considered Maria the way you consider a wet umbrella, useful, but not in the living room. "Mrs. Carter," she said, smooth as hotel marble, "this isn't a good time. We've settled the matter of the deposit with the venue. Your oversight won't complicate the event." There was no oversight, Maria said. The rain was meaner up close, needling through the gap between coat and wrist. The deposit cleared. I showed Lily the statement. "Then you have nothing to worry about," Victoria replied, as if Maria had called to schedule a cleaning. She nodded toward the outer darkness. "But you can't come in." "Let me talk to my daughter," Maria said. Behind the curtain, Lily's outline trembled. "Mom," she said, each syllable a match sputtering in wind, "please go home. I'm Brandon's, just go, okay?" Brandon's head tilted toward the door, toward Maria, toward the rain that he imagined had invented her. "This is stressful for the baby," he called, and somehow he made the word baby sound like property. "Please respect our boundaries." Boundaries? Maria almost laughed. At the clinic where she cleaned on weekends, boundaries were the blue tape you stretched across a floor you just mopped. In a house like this, boundaries could be weaponry. "I didn't take anyone's money," she said to the crack. Victoria's smile was professional. "Security?" The word landed like a shove. Somewhere inside, a radio squawked in a low male register. Maria's foot slipped on the top step, the stone was slick, and the heels she'd rescued from a thrift store for the rehearsal dinner betrayed her. She caught herself with the heel of her hand, skin biting against the edge. Pain flared, hot against the cold. Blood raindropped down her wrist and rinsed away. "God," someone muttered from behind the curtain. Lily's shadow moved toward the door and then back again, as if tethered. The crack didn't widen. Maria rose, breath shallow, the kind of breath you learn when you don't want a sob. She balanced the mush of a box on her hip the way she had once balanced Lily, and before the door could shut in her face entirely, she pressed her palm flat to the wood, leaving a mother's signature in red. "Look at me," she said, not pleading anymore, just stating terms. "If you think I took anything from your family, look at me and say it. Look at me and say I'm a thief." No one looked. The curtain stilled. The house swallowed its own light. The latch clicked home. If love is a welcome, this was arithmetic. Numbers that didn't include her. Maria set the box down with reverence it didn't deserve. Ribbons leaned out like wilting flowers. A card slid free, reserved for mother of the bride. Somehow that made her laugh, a huff of air that turned into a cough. "That's a joke," she told the stoop. She stepped backward, slow and careful. Her knees barked. It's a strange thing, the way a lifetime of small sacrifices can telescope into a single inch of wet stone. You think about the nights you didn't buy meat so the kids could have new cleats. The morning you left your own toothache for later, because Ethan needed a retainer. The afternoon you worked a double and braided Lily's hair on your lunch break while standing next to the walk-in cooler. You think about the time you called the school and lied that you were on your way with cupcakes, so they wouldn't make your girl feel like she didn't have a mother who remembered. You think about how love is not feeling so much as a schedule. Headlights bloomed at the end of the drive and rolled toward her, two sons dragging a tail of road water. A pickup swung wide and braked with a huff that was part engine, part impatience. The driver's door swung open. The rain caught the man's shoulders and slid off as if it knew better. "Maria!" Gabe Morales ducked from the cab, a battered canvas jacket coming off in one motion, the way some men draw a weapon. He was a thickened version of the boy she'd known. Crow's feet and a jaw shadowed with gray, the quick hands of someone who had lugged ladders and lifted strangers out of smoke. He used to run into burning places for a living. He still had the look of a person you could hand your worst 5 minutes to. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, already wrapping the jacket around her, already steering her by the elbow. The jacket smelled like engine oil and winter rooms where people tell the truth. "Returning decorations," Maria said. She was surprised to hear her voice, steadier than her hands. "Trying to see my daughter." Gabe looked past her into the smooth face of the house. The pickup's lamps washed over the door over the pretty stain of Maria's hand. He lifted the ruined box with 2 fingers, wincing as it sagged. Without raising his voice, he rapped twice, knuckles to wood. "As polite as Sunday school." "Mrs. Hale," he called, tone clear, words folded neat. "My dash cam is recording, so is the doorbell camera, yours, not mine. We've got the whole exchange. I just wanted you to know." The curtain shivered, the door did not. Gabe shrugged an old, easy motion. "Fair enough." He guided Maria into the truck. The seat was cold but firm, the heater whooshed blessed air around her shins. Somewhere in her bones, something thawed and ached at the same time. "Do you want me to turn around and make a scene?" he asked, half grinning the way he used to in high school when he dared teachers to measure his hair for dress code. "Because I can make a scene." "No," Maria said. Dignity can be a last blanket. She pulled it up. "No scenes." He shut her door. The rain turned the windshield into TV snow. Wipers set a rhythm, left, right, like marching, like a decision. Gabe slid in, clicked his belt, glanced at her hand. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing." She stared at the line of red ringing the cut. "Just a reminder." "Of what?" "That doors don't open for everyone." Gabe nodded as if he'd been waiting to hear her say it. He set the truck in gear, slow off the brake. The estate shrank in the rear view, the columns looking like things that pretended to hold up the sky. The road, slick and black, accepted them without question. "Do you remember," he said, eyes on the water-slicked curve ahead, "that winter when your heater quit and you kept the oven on low just to keep the place warm? You told the kids it was baking weather so they wouldn't be scared." Headlights bloomed at the end of the drive and rolled toward her, 2 sons dragging a tail of road water. A pickup swung wide and braked with a huff that was part engine, part impatience. The driver's door swung open. The rain caught the man's shoulders and slid off as if it knew better. "Maria!" Gabe Morales ducked from the cab, a battered canvas jacket coming off in one motion, the way some men draw a weapon. He was a thickened version of the boy she'd known. Crow's feet and a jaw shadowed with gray, the quick hands of someone who had lugged ladders and lifted strangers out of smoke. He used to run into burning places for a living. He still had the look of a person you could hand your worst 5 minutes to. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, already wrapping the jacket around her, already steering her by the elbow. The jacket smelled like engine oil and winter rooms where people tell the truth. "Returning decorations," Maria said. She was surprised to hear her voice, steadier than her hands. "Trying to see my daughter." Gabe looked past her into the smooth face of the house. The pickup's lamps washed over the door over the pretty stain of Maria's hand. He lifted the ruined box with 2 fingers, wincing as it sagged. Without raising his voice, he rapped twice, knuckles to wood. "As polite as Sunday school." "Mrs. Hale," he called, tone clear, words folded neat. "My dash cam is recording, so is the doorbell camera, yours, not mine. We've got the whole exchange. I just wanted you to know." The curtain shivered, the door did not. Gabe shrugged an old, easy motion. "Fair enough." He guided Maria into the truck. The seat was cold but firm, the heater whooshed blessed air around her shins. Somewhere in her bones, something thawed and ached at the same time. "Do you want me to turn around and make a scene?" he asked, half grinning the way he used to in high school when he dared teachers to measure his hair for dress code. "Because I can make a scene." "No," Maria said. Dignity can be a last blanket. She pulled it up. "No scenes." He shut her door. The rain turned the windshield into TV snow. Wipers set a rhythm, left, right, like marching, like a decision. Gabe slid in, clicked his belt, glanced at her hand. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing." She stared at the line of red ringing the cut. "Just a reminder." "Of what?" That doors don't open for everyone. Gabe nodded as if he'd been waiting to hear her say it. He set the truck in gear, slow off the brake. The estate shrank in the rear view, the columns looking like things that pretended to hold up the sky. The road, slick and black, accepted them without question. "Do you remember," he said, eyes on the water-slicked curve ahead, "that winter when your heater quit and you kept the oven on low just to keep the place warm? You told the kids it was baking weather so they wouldn't be scared." Maria snorted. "We burned a pan of biscuits we weren't even cooking." "You've always known how to open a door without a key," he said. "You prop it with humor, you hold it with your back." "That was my door," she answered. Gabe's mouth set. "Then maybe that's the lesson. When it's not your door, you don't beg at it." She looked out at the rain, which had become less like punishment and more like persistence. Somewhere behind her, a girl she loved was shivering in a bright, warm room. Somewhere ahead, a boy she loved would be at a chipped kitchen table, chewing his lower lip over homework and pretending not to listen for the sound of his mother's car. "I might have lost her tonight," Maria said. The words were soft, true, and heavier than the truck. "My own daughter." "You didn't lose her," Gabe said. "You got shut out, there's a difference. That difference feels like a hurricane. Storms pass. Lockouts end." He glanced at her, measuring whether the next thing belonged to the moment. He decided it did. "Tomorrow, we stop asking to be let in, Maria." She turned to him. "We open the door with the law." The line sat in the cab like a fourth passenger, drying off with them. Maria flexed her sore hand. She thought of Pastor Ruth at the church who had offered to mediate and been politely frozen out. She thought of the receipts folded in her wallet and the emails Lily hadn't read. She thought of all the people who keep their voices quiet and their records straight and assume the world will notice. "Gabe," she said, discovering a warmth below the ache, something older than anger and tighter than grief, "I am so tired of being decent in rooms that are not." "Good," he said, and there was pride in it. "Decent plus documented makes a case." He drove her through streets that still remembered her tires, past the laundromat where she could fold a fitted sheet with her eyes closed, past the clinic where her name tag said Maria and not Mrs. Anyone, past the diner where she'd bust tables and learned that loneliness tips better than joy. The truck's heater rattled. The rain eased. The world, as it often does after a hard decision, seemed to listen. They pulled up outside Maria's little duplex, paint peeling on the porch rail, a flowering bush determined to bloom anyway. The kitchen light glowed. A teenage boy's silhouette crossed the window, then doubled back, then crossed again, the way anxious love does. Gabe cut the engine. The sudden quiet was its own weather. "Tomorrow," he repeated, not as a threat but as a promise. "We call Pastor Ruth, we bring what we have to the right people. No more stoops, no more curtains, you hear me?" Maria nodded. The nod felt like the first turn of a key you've finally found. "Tomorrow," she said, "we won't ask." Gabe waited until the kitchen light steadied in Maria's duplex and Ethan opened the door halfway, eyes rimmed red from a video game he swore he wasn't playing. "You good, Ma?" he asked, voice pitched too casual. Gabe lifted 2 fingers in a salute from the porch and backed down the steps. "Tomorrow," he called, and then he was a dim rectangle in the rain and then not even that. Maria hung Gabe's jacket on a chair back, the fabric heavy with rain and years. The duplex held its familiar draft. She clicked the kettle on out of habit. Steam tatted its way toward the cracked ceiling paint. The boy hovered, pretending not to notice the blood drying at the edge of her hand. "You fall?" he said. "Stairs were slippery," she said. He nodded, which in 15-year-old meant I will remember every detail of this night and never mention it again. He reached for the first aid tin, the one with the cartoon bear that had long ago given up fostering cheer. He handed her a bandage without looking at her hand, the gentlest of dignities. "Homework?" she asked. "Geometry, still stupid." "Triangles have feelings too," she said, and he smiled despite himself. When he bent to unplug the kettle for her, because he had learned somewhere between babyhood and boyhood that small rescues count, she saw the same cowlick he'd had at 3 when his hair first tried to decide what it wanted to be. She wanted to smooth it with her palm the way you press a page flat. "Go sleep," she said. "We start early." He stalled. Was Lily there? She was. How was she? Inside. He swallowed. "Okay." He padded off down the hall, a hand on the wall like a blind man learning his own house. His door closed with a softness he must have practiced to keep from waking her on nights she came home late. The quiet unfurled. Maria wrapped her hand, poured tea, and sat with the cup untouched. The kind of tired she felt didn't have a remedy you could steep. She closed her eyes, and as often happens when the present is too sharp to touch, the mind reached backward, to years that had already chosen their shape. There are winters that announce themselves with a blizzard. Maria's came like a slow draft under a door you didn't know to block. She had been 28 then, with a husband who left at 5 every morning in a hard hat and came home smelling like copper and sun. Daniel Carter laughed with his whole mouth, not just his eyes, and when he proposed, he'd done it with a single grocery store daisy wrapped in receipt paper. "The expensive ring can wait," he'd said. "Let's buy the expensive groceries first." Life made a list and they checked it off. Lily first, a tangle of legs and questions, then Ethan, a solemn baby who stared at light like he was learning a word it hadn't said yet. There was a house with a lawn too small to mow wrong. A minivan that took turns like it was afraid of speed. A garage sale crib with teeth, marks from some other child's hunger. They were not rich, but poverty did not know their names. The day the winter came, it was July. Daniel kissed Maria in the doorway and she told him to stop sweating on the paperwork because she was filling out an application, night classes at the community college. "Maybe nursing," she had said, shrugging it off. "Maybe something I can use when the kids don't need me every second." Daniel had grinned. "They'll always need you every second." He turned back on the step, folded her into his arms the way a man does when he thinks there will be 10,000 more mornings, and went to work. At 2:15, the foreman knocked. She knew it was the foreman because the man kept looking at his boots as if he had misplaced a word and it might be there, stuck to the tread. The rest is a catalog of sounds. Lily, 5, asking if Daddy was home for lunch. A kettle forgotten on a lit burner until it screamed. A neighbor saying, "I can drive you," like it was permission to move. In the hospital hallway, a nurse with kind eyes said Daniel's name and then stopped saying it. And then Maria had 2 children with hair like their father's and a minivan that did not know how to drive itself home. It's astonishing what paperwork grief requires. Death certificates are printed on good stock, like a diploma you didn't ask for. The union sent over a casserole and a check that would cover 3 months if she cut the meat in half and never turned on the air. The community college application slid under the refrigerator, where dust and a crayon lived. Maria took a morning shift at the diner and a night shift at the clinic. When the heater quit the 1st November, she ran the oven on low and told the kids it was baking weather. Every time the timer dinged, she breathed. She learned there are whole seasons when hope is not the feeling you have but the schedule you keep. Lily grew into her name, quick, bright, easily bruised, then resilient. She learned to braid her own hair and later her mother's. She remembered field trip forms. She talked to Ethan when Maria's voice had to be saved for customers. Ethan made circuits out of things nobody else recognized as parts. He took radios apart and put them back together with one mysterious screw left on the table like evidence. He built a website for Pastor Ruth's church when he was 12, trading code for leftover bake sale brownies. Gabe returned too, in seasons. He and Maria had shared an algebra textbook and a single prom they didn't dance at, the unromance of poor teenagers with jobs. He'd gone into the fire service the week after graduation, then out after a back injury that you couldn't see, but that spoke up often. He started consulting for the city on safety codes and showed up at the diner on nights when he knew she'd be too tired to remember to eat. Once, when Ethan locked himself in the bathroom crying over a math test, Gabe sat in the hallway talking about the cosine like it was a dog that could be coaxed from under a bed. There were victories no one applauded, naps stolen in parked cars, school plays where Lily scanned the audience for one face and found it. There was a Christmas with a tree cut from a lot's last row, sold to her for $5 by a teenager with a guilty conscience. There were nights Maria wrote checks and ran her finger under the numbers twice, the second time for courage. When Lily hit 19, she announced nursing school and Maria taped the acceptance letter to the fridge like a pennant. "You'll be better than me," she said, and Lily rolled her eyes the way daughters do when their mother's prophecy. The spring Lily turned 21, she brought Brandon to Sunday dinner. He set his napkin in his lap without looking and complimented the casserole as if he had taken a class on triangulating sincerity. He had the posture of a man who has worn a tie since infancy. His scrubs were a color that had a name, Seal. He informed them cheerfully, and his hands were steady even when he balanced the dessert plates. Maria watched Lily watch him, and she recognized that look, the kind of admiration that glows with borrowed light. He was funny in small, precise ways. He asked Ethan about his computer builds and used the word server. He washed his own glass, and after Maria went to bed, she heard him whisper to Lily on the porch about rotations and fatigue, the kind of complaints that sound like sacrifice when you're young. When he said, "I want to make a difference," Lily squeezed his fingers and Maria thought, "Good, be difference makers." both of you. The first time Maria met Victoria was at a charity luncheon where the napkins had tears, and you could tell what you were supposed to do with your fork by the woman next to you. Victoria wore a dress that knew how to stand on its own and spoke to Maria as if she were on the board of something. "Your daughter is a marvel," she said, voice drenched in honey that had forgotten it was once wild. "Brandon says she keeps him sane. We must get you fitted for the rehearsal dinner. Wear jewel tones, you'll photograph beautifully." Maria thought it generous until later, when she realized she hadn't been asked any questions. The photograph would be for them. It happens slowly, the drift. Brandon's shifts bled into one another. Victoria's emails arrived with subject lines like logistics and expectations. The engagement came with a champagne flute and a ring that made the room feel crowded. Maria hugged Lily hard enough to recreate her. Pastor Ruth cried, which felt appropriate, as if she were sending someone off on a long ocean crossing. Deposits were due. Maria pulled savings she'd made by opting for generic cereal and buying winter coats at the thrift shop in March. She wrote a check to the venue for the amount that made her palms sweat and took a picture of the receipt, the way you take a picture of a child before the first day of school. She sent the image to Lily. "So proud of you," she typed. "I'll handle the favors." She threaded silk through punched cards again, first without thinking, then as ritual. Love is the work that nobody sees until the wrong person decides to look. In May, Lily came home from a tasting with her smile set too high. "Mom," she said, the way people say a name when they need it to carry them, "I'm pregnant." Maria's body had two reactions at once, the ache of memory and the catch of fear, and they interfered with each other like radio stations overlapping at the county line. She reached for her daughter and then for a chair. "Okay," she said, which is a word we borrow from the future. "Okay, we know how to do hard things." "It wasn't planned," Lily said, tears rising like the tide. "But Brandon's happy. His mom says we'll move the wedding up, keep it small, tasteful, no drama. She has a friend who can expedite." Tasteful, expedite, words like fine china. "Small is good," Maria said. She tried to fit happiness and worry into her mouth at once and found they were both too large. In the days after, her phone lit with Victoria's instructions, menu changes, guest list trims, a flurry of decisions that managed to feel like a verdict. When Maria offered to host the bridal shower, the reply was immediate: "We've arranged the venue." It keeps things streamlined. That week, the heater coughed a death rattle even in spring, and Ethan rigged a space heater from a fan and caution. Maria picked up an extra weekend at the diner. She wore a pair of shoes that pinched so that other parts of her would hurt less. She taught herself to fold napkins into lilies again, because some details are a prayer you can touch. Then the email came, the one from the venue, copied to Brandon and Victoria, not to Lily. "We still have not received the initial deposit." As discussed, the balance must be paid by. Maria blinked at her phone, felt the strange tilt of a room when the floor you are sure of slides. She dug up the photo of the receipt, the record from her bank, sent both to the email and to Lily. "See attached." She texted, "We're fine." No reply. Then, 20 minutes later, Victoria's handling it. Maria stood at the sink, water running as if it could wash off the feeling that had clung since the foreman's boots on her doormat all those years ago. Some winters are a season. Some try to return as a habit. She dried her hands, laid the receipt flat on the table, smoothed it with her palm the way she would a child's hair, and told herself, as she had learned to tell herself in the leanest months, "Hold the schedule. Keep the proof." Love is a ledger as much as a lullaby. The night before the rain at the Hale door, she stayed up late threading silk through cardstock, the kettle warming a kitchen that still had its own weather. Past midnight, Ethan padded out to refill his water and stopped. "Why are you still up?" he asked. "Because your sister's getting married," Maria said, attempting cheer, "and because lilies don't fold themselves." He stood behind her and placed a hand on her shoulder, the touch light but anchoring. When he went back to bed, she finished the stack and lined them up like little prayers in army formation. She turned off the light, walked past the first aid tin and the calendar and the photograph of Daniel by the river, and believed, for one brief, generous second, that doors were still something you could open if you had the right hands. Morning came. By nightfall, she would be wet to the bone at someone else's threshold, but sitting at the table with silk on her fingers and evidence under her palm. Maria Carter held to the old weather wisdom learned in cheap apartments and hospital corridors. Storms pass, and when they don't, you learn where the higher ground is. The morning after the rain, the world seemed to have repented. Sun laid itself across the cracked paint on Maria's porch rail and turned her geraniums into small, cooperative fires. The duplex smelled like toast and laundry soap. Ethan left early, hoodie up, earbuds in. "I love you" tossed over his shoulder like a coin into a fountain. Maria stood in the doorway a second longer than usual, listening to the quiet as if it were a radio between stations. Then she gathered the documents she had spread across the table, bank printouts, the venue receipt, the email thread, and slipped them into a manila folder. She had learned over time that some comfort comes not from being believed but from being prepared. Victoria's email landed at 9:06 a.m., like a summons. Subject, logistics clarifications. Maria, per my conversation with the venue, the deposit remains unresolved. For the sake of streamlining, please refrain from further payment attempts. Moving forward, all financial matters will go through me. Kindly confirm receipt. Maria read it twice, as if somewhere between the lines a kindness might be hiding. She replied with the picture of the receipt again and the bank confirmation number typed out in careful blocks. Paid on the 12th at 3:14 p.m. Please see attached. Happy to discuss by phone. A minute later, read, no reply. She set the phone down and took the bus across town to the boutique where Lily was supposed to be fitted for a second dress. For photos, Victoria had trilled, as if the first dress would be unseemly when viewed from certain angles. The place smelled faintly of perfume and money. Gowns hung like clouds. A woman with a tape measure around her neck greeted Maria with a smile calibrated to customer service and a glance calibrated to gatekeeping. I'm here for Lily Carter Hale, Maria said, stumbling over a name her mouth did not yet know how to carry. The woman consulted a tablet. They've started. Dressing room 3. The word they landed softly and still managed to bruise. When Maria pushed back the curtain, Lily stood on a low pedestal in a dress the color of whispered secrets, her belly a gentle curve beneath fabric meant for flatness. Victoria hovered with a handful of pins, directing the seamstress with the confidence of a general. Mom, Lily said, relief flickering over her face the way light does over water. You made it. Of course, Maria said. You look like you could knock a man down with a sigh. Victoria turned, a smile already assembled. Maria, there you are, we're just taking in the hem. It's impossible to get anything off the rack when you have this situation. A vague wave toward Lily's middle. Euphemism masquerading as diplomacy, but the stylist assures me we can create the illusion of continuity. Lily's eyes darted to Maria's, an apology and a plea. Continuity is overrated, Maria said, stepping forward, hands out. The best stories have a plot twist. Lily laughed, small and grateful. For 1 minute the room was 3 women and the complicated thing between them. Then Brandon arrived. He came in with hospital fatigue still on him, that specific glazed look of the newly minted and trusted with too much. He was handsome in a way that seemed to require good lighting. He kissed Lily on the temple, patted her stomach, and thanked the seamstress in the slow voice of a man unused to being ignored. We'll need to trim the guest list, he announced, as if the dress had authorized it. Mom says the board is sensitive about optics, and Pastor Ruth's hall is, well, quaint. We'll keep it tasteful. Pastor Ruth's hall is where we've had every potluck since the flood of '09, Maria said. She softened it with a smile. It holds a lot of stories, and there's good light in the afternoons. Brandon checked his watch, thumb already hooked under the band the way a habit hooks into you. We're moving this to the Hale property. It's easier for parking. Security. Security for a wedding? Maria said, but only to herself. Victoria clapped her hands lightly. Names for the seating chart, please. She handed Maria a stack of cards. We'll be using first and last names only, no nicknames. It photographs more elegantly. Maria stared down at the blank rectangles. She could write Uncle Lou on a diner napkin in her mind and conjure the smell of his aftershave. She could write Aunt Dolores and hear the click of the saints she kept in her purse. Now she was being asked to replace them with their given names and a strange formality that stripped off all the warmth like paint remover. Of course, she said, because sometimes peace is cheaper than war. Brandon's phone buzzed. He angled it away the way people do when they are either protecting a surprise or a secret. His face went neutral. It's the chief resident, he said to the side of Lily's face, not meeting her eyes. I have to take this. He stepped outside. In the mirror, Maria saw Lily watch him go and then saw Lily catch herself watching. The seamstress pinned. Victoria's voice skimmed along the ceiling about the videographer and the drone and a second photographer for the aisle angle. Maria thought of her manila folder, of numbers and attachments and a lock she couldn't jimmy with good intentions. When Brandon returned, something about him had shifted a degree, nothing you could measure, but enough that you felt the cold from the door just opened. He kissed Lily again and called Maria ma'am without the ease he used to, respect that had acquired quotation marks. They finished the fitting. Maria asked Lily if she wanted to get a sandwich, just the two of them, the way they used to celebrate little victories, a B+ on a hard exam, a night without overtime, a skate across the pond that didn't end in wet socks. Lily tapped her phone and bit her lip. "I promised Victoria we'd go over place settings," she said, apologetic. "And Brandon has to get back for a consult." "Another time." "Another time," Maria echoed, as if time were a thing you could order when you needed it. Outside, the afternoon was the kind that makes magazines. Maria stood under a tree that had the decency to be ordinary. She called the venue again, pressing 2 for accounting, then 0 for a person, then hash out of superstition. "Hi," she said when a voice answered. "Maria Carter, Carter. I'm calling about the deposit for the Carter-Hale wedding. I have a receipt here." "Let me pull it up," the woman said. Keyboard clicks like rain. "I see an entry for the 12th at 3:14 p.m. Yes, but then I see a void and a reissue request from a Victoria Hale this morning. Notes say payment disputed by family. We're holding the reservation for 72 hours. After that, we release the date." Maria felt the odd calm that sometimes arrives right before panic. "Disputed by whom?" The funds cleared. "My bank shows." "I don't know the details," the woman said, almost sorry. "I have to go by the file. You can come by in person if you want to talk to a manager." "I will," Maria said. She waited a beat. "For what it's worth, I have proof." "Bring it," the woman said, and there was a quiet kindness in the way she said it, as if she understood proof can be heavier than groceries. Maria hung up and stared at her hands. The bandage from last night had bled through at the edge. She peeled it back, checked the cut, pressed it down again. The human body is resilient, she thought. So is humiliation. Gabe texted, "Lunch, I'm nearby. Don't make me eat another gas station sandwich." She typed, "Venue says deposit voided." Victoria filed a dispute. Then, "I'm fine." He replied with a single word that managed both comedy and command: location. They met at a taco truck 2 blocks from the boutique, the kind of place where lime wedges come free and the salsa has opinions. Gabe stood with his back to the street, not paranoid, just practiced. Maria handed him the folder. He flipped through, silent, the way men do when they know words should arrive last. He paused at the email thread, at the receipt, at a line on her bank statement that might as well have been a scar. "They're not arguing facts," he said. "They're arguing narrative, different battle." "I don't want a battle," Maria said. "I want a wedding without a ledger attached to it." Gabe squirted lime over his taco. "You want to know what a fire captain told me once? If it's about to burn, it already smells." He nodded toward the boutique, toward the idea of it. "What did it smell like in there?" "Polish," Maria said. "And pins and fear." "Yours?" "Lily's," she said, surprising herself, "and maybe Brandon's, but Victoria smelled like victory." "People like her depend on everyone else staying polite," Gabe said. "Polite is how they win. Proof is how you stop them." Maria breathed in the pepper heat of the street. A bus sighed and pulled away. A child dragged a backpack solemnly like a suitcase toward a future he was late to. She thought again of doors, some that had swung wide for her, some she had shouldered open, some that had never been hers to touch. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lily. "Mom, can we not make everything a thing? Brandon's under a lot of pressure. Victoria's just trying to help. We'll sort the money. I just need calm right now. For the baby, love you." Maria read it twice. "Can we not make everything a thing? That was how you talked about weather. About a hinge that squeaked. About a mother's blood on a rich woman's door." She typed and erased, then sent. "Love you, I'm here. I have all the receipts if anyone wants to see them." 3 dots, then nothing. At 6, Pastor Ruth called. "I heard from the venue," she said, not bothering to pretend she hadn't. Small towns, even when spread over a city, have a way of shrinking when gossip is useful. Victoria asked to move the ceremony to the Hale property for privacy. "She used that word?" Maria asked. "She did. What did you say?" "That I serve the couple and the truth in that order." Ruth exhaled into the line. "You coming by tomorrow? Can make space to talk. I'll bring the church ledger, you bring yours." "Tomorrow," Maria said, feeling the word settle in her mouth the way a nail sits before a hammer knows it. "Tomorrow." By the time she reached home, the sun had softened. Ethan sprawled on the floor with a tangle of wires and an old router he'd rescued from a neighbor's trash. "What's the difference between a network and a net?" he asked, not looking up. "A net catches," Maria said, kicking off her shoes. "A network holds." He nodded like she'd passed a test and handed her a tiny piece of plastic. "Hold this." She held it, absurdly grateful for a task she could complete. When he was done, he sat back and admired the Frankenstein hum of connectivity. "What's for dinner?" "Toast," she said. "With what?" "Hope." He snorted. "We have any of that left?" "We keep making it," she said. "It's the only thing that doesn't go stale." Her phone chimed again, an email from the venue. Urgent reservation status. Per family directive, payment record has been voided pending internal review. If confirmation of deposit is not received within 72 hours, we will release your date. Please be advised that future communications should include MS, Victoria Hale for coordination purposes. At the bottom, a PDF attachment. Payment reconciliation, Hale/Carter. Maria tapped it. A spreadsheet opened, columns of amounts and notes. Her check listed as disputed. A new line marked placeholder, Hale Foundation to assume. In the comments section, one sentence. Client's mother attempted to remit personal funds without authorization. Without authorization. For her daughter? She stared until the words blurred. Then she printed it and laid it next to her receipt, next to the email thread, next to a life of small, simple math. The manila folder bulged. Proof is heavy, she thought again. Not for what it weighs, but for where you have to carry it. Ethan looked up. Mom, she smiled, eat your toast. After he went to bed, Maria took a pen and wrote on a sticky note, bring to Ruth, bring to venue, bring to whoever thinks doors open by themselves. She stuck it on the folder, as if the smallest glue might keep the future from slipping. Out the window, a wind rose. It smelled like rain, but not yet like surrender. Pastor Ruth liked to arrive early enough that the sanctuary could remember it was a sanctuary. With the lights still dim and the heat just beginning to creak through the vents, the pews gave off their faint, clean smell, wood and lemon oil and old prayers. Maria came early too, manila folder tucked under her arm like a hymn book. She chose the left aisle, halfway down, the place where she could see the altar and the door at the same time. Gabe texted he was 2 blocks away. Don't start a revival without me, he wrote. She smiled and slid the phone face down on the bench. Through the stained glass panes, the day gathered itself. A blue triangle of sky sat in the corner of Joseph's robe. Pastor Ruth touched Maria's shoulder the way one woman steadies another on an icy step. You brought it? She asked. I brought all of it, Maria said, patting the folder. Receipts, emails, a copy of the venue's reconciliation. We'll keep it simple. Ruth said, simple is how truth fits in a room. The Hale family arrived in formation. Victoria first, then Brandon carrying a garment bag like a flag, Lily in a sweater too light for the season. Behind them came 2 men Maria didn't recognize, both in coats that said expensive and expressions that said logistics. Victoria's heels ticked up the center aisle, counting the distance to the altar. She offered Ruth a hand as if bestowing it. Pastor, she said, we'll need to adjust the procession. With the change of venue, optics become paramount. Optics don't take vows, Ruth said, polite as a fence post. We want the service to feel intimate, Victoria continued, already turning toward the pews. Immediate family only in the first 2 rows. Maria lifted a hand. That's me, she said lightly, as if volunteering for dishes. Immediate family. Victoria's smile thinned. Of course, and the Hales. Of course, Maria echoed. They ran the order. Processional, welcome, readings. Ruth, without asking, handed Maria the second reading, Love That Keeps No Record of Wrongs, and Maria tucked it into her folder. The musicians tested a chord that sounded like a question. The sanctuary filled with the small, ordinary clatter of people arranging a future. Let's stage the seating, Victoria said, though no one had asked her to stage anything. She pointed. Brandon's father and I here. She marked the front right pew with her clutch. Brandon's sister next to us. On the left, Lily, of course, and... She let her gaze drift past Maria as if past a mailbox. And the Carter guests. The Carter guests are my guests, Maria said, not loudly. She stood, the folder still under her arm. I'll sit with my daughter. Victoria's attention moved to Ruth. Pastor, would you mind explaining the traditional placement? It avoids confusion. Ruth tucked her hands into her sleeves, the way clergy have learned to keep from pointing. Tradition is useful when it serves love, she said. When it doesn't, it's a costume. She looked at Lily. Where do you want your mother to sit? The room exhaled, waiting. Lily's fingers worried the hem of her sweater. She did not meet Maria's eyes. I just want calm, she said, voice thin. No scenes. Scenes, Maria said, feeling the word settle like dust on a clean table. Who's making a scene, Lily? Victoria glanced toward the men in coats. One moved 2 steps forward, the way a cloud moves to take the sun. We're simply ensuring order, she said, and somehow order became a synonym for permission. Brandon cleared his throat. Mom's right, he told Ruth, but he was looking at the aisle, not the pastor. The front rows should be reserved for immediate family and board members. There are press considerations. Donors like to feel included. Donors, Ruth repeated, as if learning a new verse. Here, it's helpful for optics, Brandon said. Optics, Ruth said again, more to the cross than to the man. I see. Mama, Lily said, turning to Maria now, eyes asking to be believed and forgiven at once. Can you just sit a few rows back for me so it's easy? I swear I'll come to you after, I swear. Promises have weights. Some are light enough to wear, some are too heavy to lift, some lie in your lap like sleeping animals you're afraid to wake. Maria held hers until her arms trembled. She tried to set it down gently. If that is what you want, she said. It's what I need, Lily said, and she looked so much like 5-year-old Lily that Maria felt the old, urgent wish to carry her home in a coat. Then sit me anywhere, Maria said to Ruth, and the pastor's jaw twitched in pain. Ruth led Maria 3 pews back, aisle end. From here, she murmured, soft enough that only Wood might hear, a mother can still reach. Rehearsal resumed. The musicians found their tempo. Brandon practiced turning without scuffing. The men in coats tested the angle of a phone on a tripod. Maria watched the shape of it all and tried to memorize her daughter's profile as if someone might confiscate it. Halfway through the recessional, a courier appeared with a padded envelope and a look of triumph as if he had crossed a river at night. Delivery for MS. Hail, he announced, holding it out to Victoria. She slid it with a nail, scanned the pages, and nodded to one of the coat men, who snapped a picture. All set, she stage whispered, satisfied. What's all set? Ruth asked, because the question belonged to the cloth if not the ceremony. Just venue coordination, Victoria said, pocketing the papers. We'll want to keep the rehearsal brief, Pastor. There's a video note to record for our guests and donors. Ruth smiled the way you smile when you decide to pray later. We keep our notes to one another, she said. That's what vows are. After, in the side room where coffee was usually poured for AA meetings and committee quarrels, Maria slid the folder onto the table. I need 5 minutes, she said. She had practiced the sentence in the bus window. Only 5? Not now, Victoria said, already checking her phone. Now, Ruth said. We're here. Maria laid out the receipt, the bank confirmation, the venue email with attempted to remit personal funds without authorization. She turned to Brandon first. It was a small mercy she allowed him. I paid the deposit, she said quietly. If there was a problem, you could have come to me. He stared at the paper as if it were a test he hadn't studied for. My mother has it in hand, he said to the corner of the table. It's better if we streamline. Streamline what? Maria asked. Mothers? Victoria reached for the spreadsheet Maria had printed. The venue will be paid by the foundation, she said. It's a charitable function if the media is involved. The deduction is cleaner that way. Ruth blinked. A wedding, she said slowly, is not a deduction. Victoria smiled as if correcting a child's grammar. It is an occasion. Lily pressed a palm to her belly like a hush. Can we please not, she whispered. I can't breathe when you talk like this. Maria looked at her daughter, and the desire to throw the papers into the trash burned through her like good whiskey. She wanted peace the way exhausted people crave sleep. She could have folded. She could have said, fine, take it, call it philanthropy. But the word authorization was still underlined in her mind, and it wouldn't wash off. She gathered the papers and slid them back into the folder. I'll handle my business, she said. You handle yours. She did not see the man in the coat lift his phone then, angle it so only the mother's face was in frame, only the folder, not the receipts. She did not see him press record while she exhaled the way a person does after swallowing fire. Rehearsal ended with a hymn none of them sang. People scattered, the Hales to their cars, the musicians to their cases, Ruth to the sacristy to put away the program draft that already felt compromised. Gabe appeared in the doorway, late, hair damp from a drizzle that wasn't serious yet. I brought donuts, he announced, holding a pink box like a peace flag. You missed the good part, Maria said. He scanned her face. Is that a joke or a diagnosis? Both, she said, more brittle than she meant. Let's go before I applaud in the wrong key. They stepped into the parking lot, where the sky had returned to the dull metal it liked this month. Gabe opened the truck door and then stopped, phone vibrating. He looked down, then up at Maria with something that was not surprise. Don't look yet, he said. Look at what? He handed her the phone anyway. The video was already climbing. Local mom disrupts daughter's rehearsal, demands control of funds. 30 seconds. Bad angle. The sound of papers thumping on a table. Maria's voice, cropped so the beginning and ending were missing, left only the middle. I'll handle my business, you handle yours, which, without its context, sounded like a threat someone might issue while knocking over chairs. The caption, entitled much. It takes a second for recognition to become pain. Maria watched twice to make sure she was not misremembering her own mouth. She saw the folder without the receipts, saw the tension without the reasons, heard the mother without the years. A comment had already sprouted beneath. Imagine the drama at the wedding lull. Another, if she can't afford it, she shouldn't demand to pay. A third, pray for the groom. The word pray, there was a theft. Gabe reached across and thumbed the screen dark. Sit, he said. His voice had gone to the place he used at scenes, steady, spare. Breathe. What did I do wrong? Maria asked, as if there might be a list and she could work through it with a pen. You stood up, he said. That's often enough to get filmed. Should I have sat down? Only if they're going to carry you. Maria laughed in a way that wasn't humor. Her hand found the cut at her knuckle and worried the edge. Lily will see it, she said. She'll text you what she thinks, Gabe said, and you'll answer with love and proof, in that order. Her phone buzzed. A message from Lily. Mom, what is this? People are sending it. Why did you do that in front of everyone? A second followed before she could type. Brandon says we need boundaries. Please stop making this about you. Maria pressed the phone to her chest for a beat as if her ribs could cool it. Then she typed, I love you. The video is edited. I have receipts. I'll bring them to you. We will not fight in public. 3 dots, then, okay, later. The word later can be a postponement or a prayer. Maria chose prayer. She set the phone down, laid both palms on the dash the way you do when you are grounding yourself on a moving thing, and stared at the church's brick wall. She thought of the reading Ruth had handed her. Love keeps no record of wrongs, and she wanted to argue with scripture. Her folder felt heavy in her lap. I brought a record, she muttered. I brought every wrong on paper. Gabe started the truck. Love doesn't keep score, he said, but justice does. In the side mirror, Pastor Ruth stepped into the lot, her hand raised like a quiet benediction. She walked to Maria's window. I saw the men with the phones, she said without preamble. I can say what I saw. I don't want your church to end up in their comments, Maria said. My church lives in a book full of comments, Ruth replied. We've weathered worse than a bad edit. She glanced toward the sanctuary door, then back at Maria. Sunday, I'll preach the text I gave you to read, but I'll footnote it with something Paul forgot to say. Love does not keep a record of wrongs, but it also does not erase a record of harms. Bring your folder tomorrow. We'll start where truth fits in a room. Maria nodded. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sweetness of whatever the bakery across the street was burning on purpose. She thought of dough turned by patient hands, of heat used for making instead of threatening. She set the folder between them on the bench seat, a passenger buckled by hope. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, Ruth echoed, and went back inside to turn off the sanctuary lights. Gabe pulled onto the street. Do you want me to promise it gets better? He asked. No, Maria said. Just promise we won't be polite when truth needs a chair. That, Gabe said, is a vow I can keep. By Friday, the video had been shared, stitched, and sermonized by strangers who did not know the names of Maria's dead plants, but knew exactly what she should have done with her mouth. She went to work, wiped tables that were already clean, and pretended not to notice the 2 girls in a corner booth watching her like a show that wouldn't load. At closing, she rolled silverware and let the familiar burr of the radio wash her mind flat. On the bus ride home, she drafted a letter to Lily in her head. Just the facts, no weather. The deposit receipt, the reconciliation note, Pastor Ruth willing to witness, the plan to meet at the venue tomorrow with everything in a folder and nothing in her voice. She wanted her daughter to meet the truth somewhere the world wasn't invited. She got off the bus 2 stops early. The night had that late spring chill that feigns mercy and then takes it back. In her tote, she carried the letter, a photocopy of the bank record, a printout from the venue with the line about authorization circled. She told herself she would not go to the Hale door. She would leave the packet with the guard, like you leave a meal for a neighbor. No knock, no insistence, just care on a step. At the edge of the estate, the wrought iron gate made a black geometry against the sky. A guard in a charcoal jacket sat in the booth rinsed with blue light from a TV. He looked up when Maria approached, his face the clean slate of a man on a shift that pays better than your conscience. Evening, he said. I need to leave something for Lily Hale, Maria said. She set the manila envelope on the counter between them like a communion wafer. He glanced beyond her at the thin road, at the shrubs trimmed into ellipses. Name, Maria Carter, her mother. He picked up a phone, pressed 2 buttons, listened. His mouth went a little sorry. I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't accept deliveries for that residence. It's not a delivery, she said. It's a letter. He tapped another number, the rhythm learned. I have a mess, Carter here at the gate, he said. He listened again and nodded as if comforted. Yes, sir, understood. Understood what? Maria asked, even as her shoulders knew. He straightened, trapped between policy and a woman with winter in her voice. There's a note on your name. No contact at the residence. Any materials should go through council. Council, Maria repeated. Who is council tonight? The moon? He slid the envelope back toward her with the gentleness you use on a cake someone baked too late. I'm sorry, he said. I don't make the notes. Behind her, a car eased up, headlights pressed low. A hush-hush kind of expensive. The window whirred down. Victoria's profile appeared, an illustration of itself. Is there a problem? She asked the guard, though she was looking at Maria. No problem, Maria said. Just a mother returning sense where she left it. Victoria's smile was the warmth of a battery. MS. Carter, we've made our position clear. You may communicate through our attorney. I'm sure Pastor Ruth explained the etiquette of boundaries. She explained Vows. Maria said, you must have stepped out. A second car rolled to a stop behind Victoria's, the slow choreography of a convoy. Brandon sat behind the wheel this time, his face lit by the dashboard like a late-night confession. He didn't lower his window. He lifted a hand, hello, or wait, or I can't. A shadow in the passenger seat moved, Lily, a curve and a stillness. Maria imagined her girl saying please don't, to no one in particular and to everyone at once. Take care of yourself, MS. Carter, Victoria said. It landed as a wish and a warning. She signaled. The gate began to slide. Maria stepped back without grace. Her heel bit gravel. The old cut on her knuckles snagged against the iron tore open with a sting that was both present and remembered. Pain flashes in two tenses. For a breath it was the foreman in the doorway again, the kettle on the stove, the handwriting on the envelope that couldn't carry what it contained. She felt dizzy in the way grief teaches you to be, upright and not exactly here. Hey! A voice called, big enough to change the weather. Hold the gate! Gabe's pickup swung in behind the convoy and braked just shy of poor decisions. He climbed out in one motion, palm up at the guard. Nobody's crossing anybody, he said, calm laid over firmness like a coat. We're just going to keep the mother on her feet. I'm fine, Maria said, which is a thing mothers say because it sounds like we're still in charge. You're bleeding, Gabe said, which is a thing friends say because they aren't fooled. He took the envelope from her, slid it into a clear plastic sleeve from the truck door pocket because he had lived long enough to know the world is 60% weather. He flicked on a small device clipped to his jacket, a body camera the size of a matchbox with the self-respect to record. For everyone's sake, he told no one in particular, and the camera in specific. Victoria leaned her head out the window of her car with the patience of someone auditioning for a portrait. Is this necessary? She asked. Like a seatbelt, Gabe said. You hope you won't need it. We have our own footage, said a voice from the second car. A coat man, Maria guessed, though tonight he looked like a dark idea with a Bluetooth. Great, Gabe said brightly. Then we can trade angles. The gate finished its slow, expensive slide and latched. The convoy rolled forward, careful not to make contact with rain or consequence. Through the tinted glass, Maria saw her daughter's hand lift and then drop, a wave aborted. That small movement felt louder than the engines. They filed a no-contact note with the guard company. The guard offered, contrite and cornered. It's not legal, ma'am, it's just noted. Noted, Maria said, and tasted the word the way you taste a coin. She pressed her thumb to the cut and watched the thumb go red. Old pain speaks in present verbs. Gabe didn't touch her until she looked like touching would not break her. Then he set two fingers at her elbow, the way paramedics do with people who know their own weight but also know the ground. We go to urgent care, he said. No heroics. Cuts look small until they're not. Besides, I want someone with a white coat to write down the part where a gate tried to eat you. It didn't try, Maria said. It succeeded a little. He smiled despite the night. Good, keep that tone, we're going to need it. At urgent care, a nurse with tattoos like vines took her vitals and asked her to rate the pain on a scale of 1 to 10. It's a 3 for the hand, Maria said, and a number that doesn't fit on your chart for the rest. The nurse nodded. We don't have a code for certain things, she said, so we write observed. She cleaned the cut, pinned down the edge of skin with a butterfly, wrapped it with a competence that felt like friendship. Accident at a private residence. The intake clerk asked over a printer's hum. At a private gate, Gabe answered. We'll be requesting the footage. Spoliation letter, the clerk said, surprising them both. My brother's a lawyer. Send it tonight. She handed over a pen like a weapon. They laughed, quick and grateful. Maria signed where she was told and felt the odd relief paperwork can bring, the sense that somewhere, in a box, the night now existed. Outside, rain began again, the softer version, like someone clapping with gloves on. Gabe leaned against the truck, shoulder to steel, and dialed a number from a contacts list that had learned trouble's area codes. Ruth, he said when the line picked up, we've got a thing. Can you open the church office? 30 minutes. I want to copy camera footage while it's still tonight. He hung up, then another call. Venue manager, Morales. Quick question about a payment record with a note that shouldn't exist. Do you ever not have a plan? Maria asked. Plans are what I carry now that I don't carry people downstairs, he said. Also granola bars. He tossed her one. It tasted like good intentions and almonds. They drove to the church, the sanctuary dark and dignified. Ruth unlocked the office with a key that had seen everything and not once bragged. Our exterior cams caught the rehearsal comings and goings, she said, tapping at an old computer that whirred like an organ warming up. You can see who filmed and when. Gabe slid a thumb drive into place. Chain of custody, he murmured, because he liked saying things that made chaos nervous. On the grainy footage, they saw the coat man adjust his phone at the end of rehearsal, saw him angle it toward the side room, saw Victoria accept a couriered envelope that looked very much like a letter of engagement with the venue she had already claimed. They watched Maria's folder appear, papers fanned, hands measured not by their warmth, but by their outline. They watched the clip begin 3 seconds late and end 5 seconds early, the way you trap truth in a frame until it behaves. Gabe labeled the file and backed it up twice because some redundancies are virtues. Ruth poured coffee that could have stripped paint but revived hearts. She sat on the edge of the desk as if it were a pew. Tomorrow I'll preach love keeps no record of wrongs, she said. I'll add, and when wrongs are recorded, love doesn't lose the tapes. Maria laughed, tired and startled by the sound. Do pastors always do stand-up this late? Only the good ones, Ruth said. You can quote me. They left with a new weight in the folder. The kind that steadies, not the kind that sinks. Gabe drove the long way round, an old habit from a time when avoiding bad corners mattered. The truck's heater sighed like a person relieved to be useful. Old pain, Maria said finally, speaking into the windshield. It keeps finding new doors. Different wood, same lock. It finds you because you're the one who opens, Gabe said. That's not a flaw, it's a risk. She watched rain edge the glass, each drop a decision. I keep thinking of Daniel, she said, saying his name like taking a book down gently. How the foreman looked at his boots when he told me. How the world shrank to a hallway and a kettle and a wallet that had our lives inside. I did everything right and still the door closed. And now here I am, in front of another door, with everything documented and the same feeling in my throat. Gabe kept his eyes on the road. I can't bring back what died, he said softly. But I can stand between you and the part that likes locking you out. Between me and the weather, she said. Between you and people who think they make weather, he corrected. They pulled up to her duplex. The porch light caught the edge of the manila, the bandage on her hand, the stubbornness in her jaw. Ethan had left a note taped to the door. Mom, leftover spaghetti in the fridge. I did the thing with the router, Wi-Fi's faster. Also, I Googled, you're right about receipts. A cartoon triangle in the margin frowned as if participating. Maria pressed the paper to her chest for a second the way you check your own pulse. He's 15, she said. And he writes like a paralegal. We'll hire him, Gabe said. Pay in spaghetti. On the porch, with the door half open and the smell of home sifting out, tomato sauce and laundry and something hopeful, Gabe paused. I want you to hear this, he said. Not because it's big, but because it's exact. Tonight I send a preservation letter to the guard company, the venue, the boutique, the church. We already have anyone with a camera and a memory. Tomorrow we go back to the venue with Ruth, with you, with your proof. We don't raise our voices, we raise the standard. If they're honest, they'll write the file. If they're not, they'll hang themselves with their own process. And Lily? Maria asked, the question like a child clinging to her coat hem. We keep leaving her doors to walk through, he said. Not the Hale door, yours. Maria nodded. She looked at her bandaged hand, at the tiny crosshatch the butterfly made, at the way small stitches could outrun large hurts given time and soap and patience. Tomorrow, she said, because it had become the only blessing she trusted. Gabe tipped 2 fingers off his cap, that graceless, perfect salute of a man who has carried other people's emergencies long enough to believe in breakfast. Tomorrow, he answered, then leaned into the truck and clicked the body camera off. We don't have to film this part, he said. This part is for us. She smiled without permission and went inside to tell a boy that networks hold and to write a letter to a girl about doors. Outside, the rain performed its quiet work on the city, polishing streets, teaching iron about rust and resilience. Somewhere across town, a gate stood closed and considered itself permanent. Somewhere in a drawer, a thumb drive waited like a small, stubborn truth. Maria set her folder on the kitchen table, next to Ethan's note and a cooling plate of spaghetti, and ran water over her hands until the sting went friendly. Old pain, she knew, doesn't ask permission. Neither, it turns out, does hope. Morning did what it always does for working people. It arrived before feelings had finished their shift. Maria woke to the sound of Ethan clattering a pan too gently, like he was trying to convince the skillet and his mother that everything was normal. She lay still a beat, inventorying parts, hand sore, jaw tight, heart busy. Then she swung her feet to the floor and told the day, the way she used to tell the oven on. By 9, the folder sat buckled in the passenger seat of Gabe's truck. Pastor Ruth rode in back with a tote bag that contained a Bible, a legal pad, and what looked like oatmeal cookies because there are kinds of advocacy that benefit from sugar. The venue manager had agreed to meet them. "I prefer when weddings start in truth," she'd said on the phone, which was as close to an endorsement as a business gave. The venue was all exposed brick and Edison bulbs, the current fashion for dressing new promises in old light. A receptionist with a nose ring and the good manners of someone who knew what the ring might provoke waved them to a conference room. The manager entered with a stack of papers and a firmness that suggested she'd escorted more than one aunt out of a bridal suite. "I'm Dana," she said, shaking hands. "Let me say this once up front, I don't like when families make the mother be the adult." Maria's laugh came out like a hiccup. "I can live with that." They sat. Maria opened the folder and laid her papers out in the order she had practiced: receipt, bank confirmation, the reconciliation printout with the "attempted to remit personal funds without authorization" note circled. Dana studied each, her eyebrows doing the small choreography of someone who refuses to be surprised on the first pass. "Okay," Dana said finally, aligning the edges with her thumbs. "Here's what our file shows." She slid over a copy from her stack. "Payment received on the 12th, your check, MS Carter." Then, yesterday, a communication from MS Victoria Hale challenging the payer of record and requesting that the Hale Foundation assume the invoice for charitable event coordination. "My staffer, not wrong to escalate, wrong to annotate, flagged your name as unauthorized. That language is on me. We don't police a mother's authorization. We police whether the bill is paid." Ruth leaned in. "And is it?" "It was," Dana said, looking Maria in the eye. "And it is. I'm restoring MS Carter as payer of record effective immediately. The date holds. Any foundation involvement will be reflected separately and appropriately, and not as a replacement for funds already remitted. I'll send a corrected ledger today." Gabe nodded once, the way a man nods when a fire break holds. "Appreciate you, Dana." Dana exhaled. "Since we're here, I'll add, charitable deductions and private events don't mix the way some folks think they do. We're not a church, we don't issue tax receipts for weddings. If a donor wants to brand the bar as philanthropy, they can try, but they can't do it through our books. I suspect you'll have better luck than I did explaining that to MS Hale." "I brought cookies," Ruth said. "They won't help," Dana said deadpan and then smiled. "But leave me one." They reviewed signatures, corrected the line that had insulted a mother, and initialed the correction like you initial a healing, small letters, big relief. When it was done, Dana stood. "If anyone calls here asking to void this again," she said, "they'll be told to speak to counsel. Yours, not mine." Outside, the day was a good copy of spring. Maria felt a weight shift to a place that could carry it. "One down," Gabe said, and Ruth added, "one restored." 'Cause pastors prefer verbs that return. They crossed the street to a coffee shop that used salvaged pews as benches. Ethan waited at a corner table, laptop open, a paper cup sweating into a ring on the wood. He'd cut second period with the breezy ethics of a teenager who knows exactly what his mother would forgive. "I made a map," he said, flipping the screen toward them. On it, a rectangle divided into 4 quadrants labeled in block letters: money, work, story, law. Maria leaned in. "Quadrants? Gabe texted me last night," he said, a little proud. "He said we needed a plan we could stick on the fridge." Gabe lifted his palms. "It's true, all good battles deserve an infographic." Ethan tapped the first box, money. "Phase 1 is financial," he said. "We track who pays what, when, and why the story changes. Mom has the venue. I'll scrape public filings for the Hale Foundation. IRS Form 990s are public, by the way. We can see if they've categorized any private spending as charitable. If there's a pattern, we note it." Ruth raised an eyebrow. "You do this for fun?" "I do this for Wi-Fi," he said. "And because some people think a 990 is a secret code. It's not, it's just a long receipt." He moved to work. Phase 2 is professional. Brandon's hospital has a conflict of interest policy. I found it on their website. Residents can't accept gifts or in-kind benefits from entities that do business with the hospital, like a foundation that funds a wing or a vendor that caters events for personal use. A wedding paid through the foundation might trip that wire. We don't file a complaint, we ask for clarification. Questions are less aggressive and harder to ignore. Gabe grinned at Maria. Your boy is lethal in a cardigan. Ethan pretended not to enjoy it. He tapped story. Phase 3 is social, not the internet. We go small and true, Pastor Ruth's pulpit, the church bulletin, conversations in rooms where people know our names. We don't post. We don't clap back. We let the right people see the full clip and the receipts. We build a chain of truth that survives screenshots. Ruth patted the tote bag. I can host a listening night, no cameras. People forget what that feels like. Ethan tapped law. Phase 4 is legal. Preservation letters sent, thanks Gabe. If they mess with files, that's on them. If they try to harass mom or escalate at church, that's restraining order talk. We don't go there unless we need to. Our rule is daylight, nothing dirty, everything documented. He sat back, flushed with the high you get when your hands find work they were made for. We stay boring, he said and smiled. Boring wins. Maria reached across and squeezed his wrist, and in that small gesture the old ache softened. Boring is a luxury, she said. Let's buy a little. They assigned tasks. Ruth would draft the listening night, invite with language that felt like home. Gabe would email the guard company and the boutique a preservation notice. We note your note, he dictated, pleased with himself. Maria would visit the boutique armed with the corrected venue ledger and an offer to pay for alterations directly, no triangles of authorization for others to weaponize. And me, Ethan said, sliding the laptop back toward himself, I'm going to live on public databases and in the Wayback Machine. The what? Maria asked. Internet time travel, he said. Screenshots of websites before they got edited by people who suddenly understand optics. They scattered with the productive hum of a crew that believes in ladders. Maria and Ruth walked to the boutique while Gabe made calls in the truck like a general in a war that would be won by paperwork. Ethan stayed put, headphones on, fingers a blur. The boutique smelled like expensive petals and expectations. The same clerk from yesterday looked up with a polite wariness. Maria laid the corrected venue ledger on the counter and a credit card beside it. I'd like to settle any open charges tied to Lily Carter's alterations, she said. Directly. The clerk skimmed the page, eyes widening at the line where payer of record had been restored. Oh, she said, we got an email from MS Hale this morning. She asked us to bundle costs through an event account. Please don't. Maria said gently, we're unbundling. The clerk nodded, relief showing up like blush. I can run this now. Swiped the card, printed a receipt, slid it over with the conspiratorial delight of someone who has chosen a side and knows it's the human one. Congratulations, she added, then winced. I mean to your daughter, and to you for the receipt. Receipts are my love language, Maria said, and the girl laughed too hard because it felt good to laugh in that room. Outside, Ruth linked her arm through Maria's. Small victories, she said. Small receipts, Maria corrected. Back at the coffee shop, Ethan had made friends with a spreadsheet. He turned the screen as they sat. Okay, he said, trying to tame his grin and failing. I've got two things. First, Hale Foundation 990s. In the last 2 years, they list event marketing services paid to a vendor called Blue Line Strategies. That's fine, except Blue Line is registered to an address that matches the media firm that posted the local Mom Disrupts rehearsal clip. Same suite. Same principle. The video wasn't organic, it was content. Gabe let out a low whistle. They paid to punch down, he said, on a church rehearsal from the foundation. Ruth pressed her lips together in a shape that, on a less generous woman, might have been a curse. We'll be charitable, she said. We'll give them a chance to repent. Ethan held up a second finger. Second, hospital policy PDF from Brandon's residency program. He clicked, scrolled. Section 7. 4. Residents shall avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of impropriety. Accepting gifts, services, or preferential treatment from donors or affiliated entities for personal use is prohibited. If the foundation is paying for anything tagged as personal, and if Brandon knew, it's a problem. If he didn't know, he's in the splash zone of someone else's arrogance. Maria stared at the lines as if they were a horizon. She felt no triumph, only a tightening that happens when a complicated truth confirms the simpler one you already knew, that some doors are closed not by hinges but by habits. I don't want him destroyed, she said, surprising herself and not. I want him decent. Decent is a kind of destruction to people who prefer advantage, Ruth said, but it's also a rescue if they let it be. Gabe's phone buzzed. He glanced, then looked at Maria. Venue sent the corrected ledger to all parties, he reported. Hale Council CC'd. The guard company acknowledged our preservation letter, and the boutique forwarded MS. Hale's bundle request to their legal with a note. Payer disputes change, proceed with caution. You made grown-ups out of a room, Maria. She exhaled. Relief is a shy animal. You don't move too fast or you scare it. What now? She asked. Now we tell our story to the one person whose permission matters, Gabe said. We ask Lily to coffee, with Ruth if she'll come, with Ethan if she'll listen to a boy explain conflicts of interest without sounding like a lecture. We bring the folder. We bring no anger. We bring the principal. He looked at Ethan, who grinned. What was it? Daylight, Ethan said. Nothing dirty, everything documented. Maria nodded. Daylight. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unsaved number that did not need a name. MS, Carter, please refrain from contacting staff at the venue and boutique. Future communications should be routed through our office. We are exploring defamation remedies related to your recent conduct. Beneath it, another from Lily. Mom, can we meet? Today, somewhere not the church. Brandon will come too. I want to clear the air. 2 messages, 2 doors. She typed to Lily first. Yes, the cafe by the park, 1 hour, just us or Ruth, your choice, 3 dots. Then just us please, 3 p.m. Gabe read the lawyer text over her shoulder. They're trying to scare you back to the stoop, he said. Let them rattle the gate, Ruth said softly. We will be in a room with light. Maria tucked the folder under her arm. The bandage on her knuckle tugged a little when she gripped the handle. The pain felt less like a warning now, more like a reminder. 3 o'clock, she said. Ethan cleared his throat. One more thing, he added, blush rising, excitement and dread arriving together like twins. He turned the laptop back to her to a screenshot of a foundation filing and a business registry. He pointed to an address. That suite number, he said, isn't just Blue Line Strategies. It's also a shell that pays for private security and brand protection for high-net-worth families. The agent of record? He zoomed. Victoria Hale. The word brand sat on the table like a stain. Outside, the noon sun did what it could with a city that sometimes preferred polish to penance. Maria closed the laptop gently, as if not to wake something. Okay, she said, and the word this time had a different gravity. Then we'll bring one more thing to coffee. What's that? Gabe asked. Grace, she said, and the truth that can live with it. The cafe by the park was the kind of place that tried to make peace with mornings, scratched tables, overwatered plants, a chalkboard that believed in muffins. At 2:58, Maria chose the small table near the window. The light was honest there, and set the manila folder down without drama. She ordered water, not because she wasn't thirsty, but because she knew the rules of conversations that matter. Don't give your hands something hot to spill. Lily arrived at 3:04, a sweater too light for the day, hair pulled back in a way that said she'd tried twice. The bell over the door made a cheerful lie. She slid into the chair and wrapped both hands around an empty cup as if it might warm anyway. Thank you for coming, Maria said. I don't want to fight, Lily said. Her voice was a wire pulled tight. Brandon's, well, he's hurt. He thinks you're making this about you. Mom, that video. It's edited, Maria said softly. We'll get to that. But first, I want to say something without papers or rules. You are my daughter. I love you without invoices or optics. That doesn't change because a camera angle did. Lily's mouth wobbled, then steadied. I know, she said. She didn't yet, not fully, but somewhere the truth had taken a seat. Maria slid the folder halfway across the table and stopped, like a dealer who refuses to gamble. I brought proof, she said. Not to win, to clear fog. Lily looked at it as if it were a door. Show me, she said. Maria placed the venue receipt on the table, the bank confirmation, the corrected ledger Dana had emailed that morning restoring payer of record. She let each page sit before adding the next, building a small paper staircase. They voided your payment? Lily asked, frowning. Why? Because calling generosity unauthorized makes it easier to replace it with branding, Maria said. The venue fixed it. The boutique will bill me directly. I'm not fighting for a front pew. I'm fighting for the right to buy napkins without a press release. Lily traced the underlined phrase, payer of record restored, as if the words might smudge. Brandon's mom said it was cleaner if the foundation handled things. For taxes, Maria said, letting the word be as ordinary as salt. Foundations can do good. They can also launder image. I'm not impugning every donor. I'm naming a habit, pay privately, brag publicly. I won't be part of that. It's not bragging, Lily said, reflex in teaching. Then she sighed. Okay, sometimes it's bragging. Sometimes, Maria echoed. Lily looked up. What about the video? Maria slid a thumb drive from a small cloth pouch Ethan had labeled in neat block letters, church-wide cams rehearsal. She set it beside the water glass like a treaty. Pastor Ruth's exterior cameras caught who filmed and how they cut it. You can watch it at home, or now. Lily flinched at home. I'll watch tonight, she said. Not with Brandon, just me. Good, Maria said. Context is a candle, you don't need a crowd to light it. They sat a minute in the good kind of silence. Outside the window, a boy threw stale bread at ducks that didn't deserve the insult. The smallest duck took big bites anyway. Persistence can look like poor taste, Maria thought, and forgave the bird. Lily cleared her throat. There's something else, she said. Victoria sent me forms. She called them donor compliance. They're like permissions for the foundation to coordinate vendors, manage the guest list, approve photos. She said it would protect us from social media misinterpretation. She wants me to sign today. Maria kept her jaw from tightening by counting to 3. Did you sign? I told her I'd review with Brandon, Lily said. He said it's just paperwork. Mom, it's also much. I wanted a potluck and a dress that fit. I didn't want a brand. Then don't sign a brand, Maria said. You don't owe anyone your image as a donation. Lily's hand went unconsciously to her belly. I keep thinking about the baby. I want calm. Then choose the road that isn't paved with other people's names, Maria said. Calm is not the absence of noise. It's the presence of boundaries that belong to you. Lily's phone buzzed, face down on the table. She didn't flip it. Brandon will ask why we're making this hard. You can tell him we're making it honest, Maria said. Hard is what you call honest when you're used to shortcuts. They paid for coffee neither of them had drunk and stood. At the door, Lily hugged her. It was quick, the kind you mean and ration. I'll watch the video, she said into Maria's shoulder. And the receipts, I'll think. I'll be here, Maria said. Thinking isn't something you have to do alone. When Lily left, Maria sat down again for a minute to let her pulse match the table's old wood. Across the cafe, a couple bickered in loving whispers about the right way to fold a stroller. There are fights that are really choreography. Gabe texted, neighbor across from Hale Gate has a doorbell cam. He's home. I'm going to knock like a Girl Scout. Maria, do you need me? Gabe, no. Moms don't need to run laps to prove they care. Sit. Breathe. I'll bring cookies back if he has any, or footage. Maria smiled. On the bus home, she thought about the boys with phones, the coat men, how efficiently they had clipped a mother out of her own story. She thought about Ethan's quadrants, about the square-labeled story and how the cheapest version of it sold fast while the true one required chairs and time. At the duplex, Ethan had expanded his map. On the kitchen table, 4 handwritten headers now had sticky note constellations beneath them. Update, he said, swiveling the laptop. We got more than we asked for. He played the neighbor's doorbell footage Gabe had texted, a wide, clear view of the gate, of Maria standing still, envelope in hand, of Victoria's car rolling up, window down, the exchange more ballet than brawl. No raised voices, just posture. Then, after Maria stepped back, the gate closed with the indifferent elegance of expensive machinery. Gabe got the homeowner to email us the original file and sign a note, Ethan said. Time-stamped. He said my wife would kill me if I didn't help a mom. Maria swallowed gratitude too big for the room. What else? Ethan clicked and a screenshot filled the screen, an archive of the Blue Line Strategies website from a year ago, courtesy of the Wayback Machine. At the bottom, in small print, proud partner of Hale Foundation initiatives. The current website had scrubbed that line. Public then. Hidden now, Ethan said. One more thing, Brandon's residency program posted an Instagram last spring there. He pulled it up. Brandon in scrubs at a foundation gala, tagged with the hospital, the foundation, and #donor appreciation. Caption says, grateful for the generosity that fuels our training. Good, but if the foundation starts paying for personal wedding stuff, it blurs. I'm not saying he did anything on purpose. I'm saying someone is used to treating proximity as permission. Maria stared at Brandon's smiling face, the familiar, affable smile of a man who had been photographed enough to trust cameras. She didn't feel rage. That surprised her. She felt an ache shaped like a warning label. I don't want to ruin him, she said again, almost to the wall. I want a map he'll actually follow. Gabe walked in without knocking, the way family does after the first 10 years of friendship. He waved a USB like a tiny flag. Doorbell footage in hand, he said. Neighbor also offered lemonade with an attitude. I took both. He looked at Maria's face and gentled his voice. How'd coffee go? She hugged me, Maria said, as if reporting a weather break. She's going to think. That's the best verb, Gabe said, and set the USB next to Ethan's laptop like a relay baton. Ready for phase 2 of gathering? Ruth's listening night is tonight at 7. No cameras, just people with words. We'll invite the ones who matter. Choir moms, ushers, the 2 old men who argue about baseball on the back pew. Truth sticks better when it touches their ears first. Do we invite the Hales? Maria asked. We leave the door open, Ruth said from the doorway, surprising them. She'd let herself in as easily as a benediction. They can walk through it or not, but they will not say we locked it. She set her tote on the table and pulled out a stack of blank index cards and felt tip pens. "We're going to write our story in nouns and verbs," she said. "No adjectives. Adjectives get you in comment sections." "Receipts are nouns," Ethan said. "Exactly," Ruth replied. "And paid is a verb." They spent the next hour arranging proof the way you arrange chairs before a meeting you hope will heal more than it hurts. Maria wrote receipt, venue, paid 3:14 p.m. 12th on an index card and clipped the paper to it. Ethan labeled a USB doorbell, gate, no contact accepted. Gabe printed the residency policy section, highlighting appearance of impropriety with a patience that felt like kindness. At 6:30, a knock. The neighbor with the doorbell camera stood there, a shy half-smile under a ball cap, a pie in his hands the size of an apology offered by someone else. "My wife sent this," he said. "Also, she says if anyone gives you trouble, she makes a mean potato salad and an even meaner phone tree." "Bless her," Ruth said, taking the pie like an offering. At 7, the church smelled like coffee and lemon oil again. People came who had children in the nursery once upon a time, who had put out folding chairs for funerals, who had sat with Maria in silence when Daniel died and taught their bodies how to occupy a pew beside grief. Ruth set the tone. "We're not here for sides," she said. "We're here for shape. This is what happened, this is what was said, this is what was paid, this is what was voided and restored. No adjectives." Maria spoke last. She didn't mention rain, she didn't mention doors. She said, "I paid the deposit, it was voided by someone else and restored by the manager." The video circulating is edited. Here is the full angle from the church camera. "I tried to leave a letter at a gate. The guard was instructed to refuse. I bled a little. Urgent care wrapped it. I have receipts." She held up the folder like a Bible and then set it down like bread.